Greetings, my name is Dave Langer. This tutorial is in support of my new blog series, Introduction to SQL for Excel Users. If you like what you see at any point during this video and you want to learn more, please click up here and it'll take you to my website where you can see the blog series in its totality. At the time of this recording, the blog series is relatively new, so if you go check it out as soon as this video is up, you're not going to see a lot of posts, but I will be adding 2 to 3 posts every week until the blog series is complete. The goal of this series is to take advantage of people's Excel skills and use that as a training tool, as a mechanism for learning how to do SQL. And by the way, that's really all you need. And in fact, good Excel skills are arguably the single best background for learning SQL. And the reason for that is simple. The base idea in Excel is a table of data. And the base idea in a database or in SQL, or however you want to think about it, is a table. Ergo, everything that you know in Excel translates to SQL and vice versa. So if you know Excel and you want to get into SQL, which I highly recommend if you're interested in up-leveling your analytics game, then this is the tutorial for you. Before we get started, one thing I need to mention, this tutorial assumes that you have sufficient privileges on your machine. And in particular, what this tutorial teaches you is how to put SQL Server on a local Windows machine, whether that's a laptop or a desktop. As such, you have to have enough permissions on the machine to install the software. So what this means is if you're using your work laptop, let's say, if your IT department locks your machine down, which is very common in big companies, you might not be able to do this tutorial. If that's your particular case, be sure to contact your help desk and tell them what you're trying to do, and they should either install it for you or give you sufficient permissions to allow you to do it. Okay, let's get started. Okay, here we are on my laptop. Now, as I mentioned before, and I'm going to reiterate, you need to have sufficient privileges on your Windows machine to do what I'm going to do. So for example, if you're using your work laptop and your IT department doesn't allow you to install software, this isn't going to work. So if that's your particular situation, what you're going to need to do is contact your IT department and tell them what you're trying to do and see if they can give you sufficient permissions on your machine. For simplicity, I'm also going to ignore Antivirus. Some corporate IT shops have very, very strict implementations of antivirus, and they think almost anything that you do or try to install could be interpreted as a virus. That will also prevent you from being successful. Unfortunately, I just can't troubleshoot all this stuff for you. So if you're using a work laptop and you are not an administrator on your laptop, then this might be problematic for you. So if that's the case, please contact your help desk and ask them what they can do to help you out. Okay, that being said, sweet. I'll make an assumption that you're an administrator on your laptop, which means like you have godlike capability to do whatever you want. Sweet. This is my home laptop, one of my home laptops, so I am an administrator on this machine. Okay, so first thing you do, fire up your browser and just type in SQL Server Developer Edition. You can see here, obviously I've searched for this before. Hit enter, and you'll come up with SQL Server Downloads. Go ahead and click on that. And we're not going to be working with Azure. I'll be doing another video later on that will cover this. And we're going to be doing on-premises because we're going to install it on our local machine here. So we want to download a free trial, but developer is actually a better deal for us. Right? You can see here right here. SQL Server 2019 Developer is a full-featured free edition, licensed for use as a development and test database in a non-production environment. Basically what this means is you get all of the SQL Server goodness. You just can't make any money with it, right? You can't run a website on it. You can't build an e-commerce platform on it, anything like that. You can develop it, but you just can't make money off of it. So this is exactly what we need. So we just click download now, and that's going to take a while to download the exe here. Well, I guess almost no time at all, actually. Isn't that nice? Oh, thank you, McAfee. And next up, we want to download the AdventureWorks database. This is the sample database that we're going to be using in the tutorial. So you can see here, you can just type in AdventureWorks sample database, hit enter, and you can see here, install and configure AdventureWorks sample database. Okay. So we click on that. And if we scroll down, you'll see OLTP downloads. This stands for online transaction processing. We don't want that. Not for our purposes. What we want is the data warehouse downloads, the DW, the data warehouse downloads. If you don't see DW in the file name, you've got a problem. You want to see DW in the file name. Now we want to download the 2017.back. What this is a backup of a database. In SQL Server, you can have many databases on a server, and you can back them up to a binary file so that you can archive them in case something bad happens to your database, and then you can restore it from a backup. Usually your DBA, your database administrator in a production environment, takes care of this for you. As an analyst, you don't really need to worry about it. But we'll use this mechanism to download the AdventureWorks data warehouse. It'll have all the tables and all the data, all the things that we need for the tutorial in a nice little file. And I'll show you how to restore it in SQL Server, and we can have a lot of SQL fun with this thing. Okay, so click on that, and what it's going to do is going to start downloading here. This one is also a relatively small file. Lastly, we want to install SQL Server Management Studio, or SSMS. SSMS is a graphical tool. What it allows you to do is connect to the SQL Server and look at the database server, look at the database, look at the tables, run your queries, all that kind of stuff. The way to think about it is that SSMS is to SQL Server as Chrome here is to a web server. You use Chrome to connect to a web server and browse what's stored on it, whether you're going to the NewYorkTimes.com or CNN.com or LinkedIn or Amazon or whatever. Those all have web servers on the other end that have web pages on them. And you need the browser to communicate to the web server, and then the web browser then actually gives you a visual experience over that web server. SSMS is like that. It allows you to connect to the SQL Server and give you a visual experience. Okay, so let's type in SQL Server Management Studio. Okay. You can see right there, we're going to download SSMS, SQL Server Management Studio. Now this file is a little bit bigger. That's going to take a while. So we're going to go ahead and download that. And you can see here it's 535 megabytes. Now, this laptop that I've got is reasonably powerful. So while this is downloading, I'm just going to go ahead and start the install here. This is the install for SQL Server. You can see here it's SSEI dev. That's your indication that this is the actual SQL Server itself, not SSMS. So we'll click that. And it's going to ask you, is this okay? Right? Do you trust this software? Well, of course, it's from Microsoft. Of course we trust it. It's good stuff. So we click yes, and this will take a second. And what's firing up now is the developer edition. This is exactly what we want to see, right? And you don't want to fiddle with any of this stuff, okay? This is a very simple tutorial. We're not going to get into an advanced stuff. And quite frankly, I'm not a DBA. So there's a lot of stuff about SQL Server I just don't know anything about. So we just want basic. We'll click on basic. And of course, we're going to accept Microsoft's licensing terms, which basically says, for all intents and purposes, don't use this to make money. And we just click install. Now, what's going to happen is it's going to, behind the scenes, SQL Server is downloading all of the binaries that it needs, because this is a very lightweight setup exe. And it's downloading everything, and you can see here how it's like just installing a whole bunch of stuff. Now, while that's going on, there's something I should explain, because we're going to go through this later on. When you put SQL Server on a machine, whether that's a server machine, a VM, or your laptop like I'm doing right here, it is set up to run all the time. By default, it's set up to run when you boot up your machine, it's going to start up. SQL Server is going to start up because it thinks that it's a database engine and it needs to run 24/7. Depending on the machine that you install it on, that's maybe a problem, maybe not. Generally speaking, what I advise folks to do when they're doing things like tutorials is to go in and reconfigure SQL Server, and I will show you how to do this later, to not automatically start. And the reason for this is simple. SQL Server is a memory hog. It wants to use all the memory on your machine, or as much of it as it possibly can. So when you're doing your queries and you're practicing your SQL, that's no problem. But generally speaking, if you're just like streaming Netflix or playing a video game or something like that, you don't want SQL Server running in the background. So we'll set this up to be what is known as manual, which means that when you boot up your machine, SQL Server will not start. You'll actually have to go in and start it every time you're going to practice your SQL. And again, I would also recommend, and I will show you how to do this as well, to shut it down when you're done. So that way you know that it's not sucking up all the memory on your machine. Okay, so this is going to take a little bit of time. So I'm going to go ahead and fade out, and we'll resume once this is all completed. Okay, we're back. Notice here how everything is installed, and you'll see buttons for connecting and install Ssms. Don't worry about that right now. Just go ahead and click close. Okay, and it'll say, are you sure you want to exit? Yeah, we do. Okay, we're good. Okay, we got SQL Server installed. Awesome. We got the database engine. We've got the code, the binaries running on the background that allow us to have databases. What we don't have is an actual database. We'll get to that next. But before we do that, we're going to need to install Ssms because that is our browser. That is essentially our SQL Server browser. So if we click on this Ssms download here, this will start up the setup installation process for SQL Server Management Studio. And of course, yes, we trust Microsoft. And here we go. And just accept all the defaults. Just trust me on this. You want simple, easy peasy, just click install here. Click install. Got to click it. Okay. Now, Ssms is a really super powerful tool. I've used a number of tools for different types of databases every now and then during my career. And I will admit, I like SQL Server, I like Ssms. I am a little bit biased, I will admit. If you've seen any of my posts on LinkedIn, you know that I've worked on the SQL Server product team during my time at Microsoft. So I'm very partial to it. It's a great database. I think I saw an article recently that essentially said that they were listing database engines in terms of popularity. And I think it was MySQL was first, Postgres was second, and then SQL Server. Now the first two are open source and free, so that's not surprising that they're popular. But of all the paid databases, SQL Server is the most popular. The commercial database is the most popular. So that being said, learning how to use SQL with SQL Server is a very good thing because it's very commonly used, especially in enterprise environments. Okay, SQL Server is now Ssms, is now installed. This is great. So now we can close it. And now that everything's installed, I can go down here and I can ask it for, I can start typing in SQL Server man, and that'll pull up SQL Server Management Studio. Click that, and it's going to go ahead and fire up Ssms for me. Now, what I typically like to do is pin this to my taskbar because, not surprisingly, I use Ssms all the time. So it'll take a little bit to load up the very first time here. And here we go. Now, what you'll see here is a connection dialog. Now, if you've set everything up just the way I've showed you, you don't need to do anything. All you have to do is click connect. You can't see this because I've blocked it out in Camtasia, but what this will be is the name of your local computer. And Windows Authentication just says, look, you're going to connect as you, whatever you log into your machine as, that's who you want to connect as. Basically what it says is like, for example, my user account on my laptop is called David. I installed the software as David, so therefore I just need to connect as David. Okay, so you have to just click connect. Okay, now what this will show you up here, I've blacked it out with Camtasia, is this is your local machine. And this is my desktop, my Dell laptop machine right here. Okay, and you'll notice a whole bunch of file folders. SQL Server is not simple. It's an enterprise class database. There's a lot of stuff going on. For our purposes for this tutorial, I'm only going to cover the bare minimum things that you need. Okay, just the bare minimum. So what we need is a database, because if we open this up, you'll see here that we have system databases. Don't fool those. Don't touch them. Pretend like they don't exist. You never saw this. And we have database snapshots. Don't worry about that. Again, it's a backup kind of thing. You don't really need to worry about that. But what you don't see is any databases. That's a problem. So what we need to do is install a database. Now, the easiest way to do this is to open up the Windows Explorer here, go to your downloads, okay, and you'll see here, this is the data, this is the this is the backup file for the AdventureWorks data warehouse that we downloaded. What we want to do is stick this into a different file folder, and typically what I do is I just put it in a temp folder off of your C drive. That's just the easiest way to do it. So what you can do here is you can just right click on this, and what you're going to want to do is click cut. What this does is it says, look, copy this to the clipboard because I want to move it somewhere. You just go ahead and click cut. And then what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to go to the C drive here. And I've already created a temp folder. You can create one for yourself if you'd like. Open it up, and you can see here that I've done this already before. And I'll just paste it here. And that's exactly what you want to do. Now, you won't have to do the replace thing that you just saw, because if you're creating this temp folder yourself, there's not going to be nothing in it. Okay, so here you go. You've got your AdventureWorks right here. Now you notice that previously I downloaded the OLTP database, but this is all we need. Okay, click on databases because we need to add a database. Go ahead and right click on that. And what we want to do is we want to select Restore Database. Because remember what we did is we downloaded the AdventureWorks Data Warehouse .bak file, the backup file, which is essentially just a freeze-dried, frozen, binary snapshot of the database. And what that allows us to do is to take that file and then reconstitute it into a working database inside of SQL Server. So go ahead and click Restore Database. And this dialog, I'm so sorry, it's definitely something Microsoft could invest some time in improving. It's super not intuitive at all. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we need to specify the source. We want to specify the source of of our backup file that we're trying to restore. So it's coming from our device. Specifically, it's coming from a file on our hard drive. The device in this case is the hard drive. So not very intuitive, but you want to click this little button over here with the 3 dots, the ellipsis. Click on that. And we do want to come from a file. Now notice you can use a URL. We just want file because remember we downloaded the file onto our hard drive. And then we need to add the backup file. So we go ahead and go here. And you'll notice that the reason why I moved it to ctemp is just so that it's easy to find. You don't have to put the backup file in ctemp if you don't want to. That's just what I did because it's easy to find. So if you click on ctemp, you can see here we want the AdventureWorks DW 2017.back file, our backup. Click OK. This is all we need to do. So once again, click OK. And then just click OK. Yay! So we've got a database now. And notice that it pops up over here. Okay, this is great. This is your default environment for this particular tutorial if you're using SQL Server on Windows. Now, I will have a later video. If you want to use the Azure cloud, you can certainly do that as well. I will show you how to spin up what is known as a Microsoft Azure Data Science VM, which will be a Windows VM in the Azure cloud. You can get a free trial account with Azure. Won't cost you anything to use for the purposes of the tutorial. And all of this is already done for you, basically, except for the database stuff. As I recall, I don't think AdventureWorks is installed by default in the VM, but don't quote me on that. If it isn't, I'll show you how to do what we just did, of course, in the VM, but it's basically the same process. Okay, so as you're going through the tutorial, as I'll show you later, how to start SQL Server. Once you've done that, you'll fire Ssms up, you'll connect as I just showed you, and what you'll see is this right here, right? You'll see your database, and you can open this up, and as I said before, and I'll repeat again, there's a lot in SQL Server. There's so much in SQL Server. I will only show you the things that matter for this particular tutorial, just the bare bones, the bare minimum, just the basics. So all we're going to care about are tables. Don't worry about any of this other stuff. Okay, not synonyms, don't worry about programmability, don't worry about the service broker, none of that. All we care about is tables. Okay, so you can see here, here are all the tables. Now, if you recall from the second blog post, for example, I showed you in that blog post this right here, fact call center, this table, and I opened it up, and then I opened up the columns. Ignore the keys and the constraints and the triggers, the indexes and the statistics. You don't want to deal with any of that right now. All we're going to care about for our tutorial is basically the name of the table and then the columns. Okay, now this is interesting, but it's not particularly useful. What you want to be able to do is look at the data, query the data, do things with the data. So the easiest way to do that is to right-click on the table you're interested in, and a whole bunch of stuff shows up. Okay, a whole bunch of stuff shows up. Generally speaking, for the purposes of this tutorial, the only thing that you'll ever do potentially is just grab this option, which is select the top 1,000 rows. Okay. Now, when I click on this, what you're going to see is what is known as a query window. And inside of it, there's going to be some SQL. I'm not going to explain any of the SQL right now. Right? That's the purpose of the tutorial, is to teach you all that good stuff. Right now, we're just trying to get set up. Okay, so if I just click on that, it'll take a second. And here is some SQL. It's formatted in a particular way. Don't worry about it. What I just want to show you is that it pulls back the first 1,000 rows. And what you get back is something that looks very much like an Excel table. Not surprisingly, as I've indicated before, there's a lot of similarities between Excel and SQL Server, or any database for that matter. They basically everything's a table. That's how both Excel and databases work, relational databases work. Now, a couple things to note. You can see here the database name, and you can see here it pulled back 120 rows. And the reason for that is there's only 120 rows of data in the database, in this particular table in the database. If there were 20,000 rows, you'd only see 1,000 rows coming back, because it just this query by default just asks for the top 1,000 rows. Okay, cool. Now this whole thing right here is known as a query window. This is your canvas. When you're working with T-SQL and you're working with SQL Server, this query window in Ssms is your canvas. This is how you create your SQL artistry, is right up here. In this part, the top pane is where you write your SQL, and you execute your SQL and you get the results. Now, how you execute the SQL is with this little button right here. You can also use F5. That's what this little tooltip is showing us. But generally speaking, you just go ahead and click execute. And what it'll do is it'll run all of the goodness that you have here. All of the goodness that you have here. And that's how you basically work with SQL Server. I mean, this is extremely simple, very bare bones. That's all we need for the purposes of this tutorial. Now, if you want to create your own brand new query, you just click this button right here called New Query. And not surprisingly, it opens up a blank query window. Now, I'm just going to write a really quick query here. I'm not going to explain anything that I'm doing. I'm just going to go ahead and pull data from the same table. Now, this is what's known as Intellisense. Notice how it's like kind of recognizing what I'm doing and trying to help me out. You just click Tab, and it'll fill it out for you automatically. Basically, this is saying just pull back all the records from the table called Fact Call Center. Ignore this right now. This is known as a schema. We'll talk more about that later. Just click Execute. Boom. 120 rows, back again. Awesome. Okay. This is how you'll do things. When you're going through the tutorial and you actually want to try out some SQL, you're going to start up SQL Server, which I'm going to show you in a second how to get that how you will do that. Then you're going to want to fire up Ssms. Then you're going to want to open a new query window, just like I just did here, and then start crafting your SQL artistry. Now I'm going to go ahead and pin this to my taskbar because, well, that's just the way I roll. And I like to put it in place. And I like to have my icons, for my tools in a certain order. And you can see here, I also have R. If you're not familiar with that, it's a data science type of programming language, which is really cool. Okay, great. So that's the super basics of querying SQL Server. And that's what we'll be doing basically throughout this tutorial. It'll be very simple. Okay, Now I'm just going to go ahead and close these down, and it's going to say, hey, do you want to save the changes? And I'm like, nah, I don't really care. And then I'll just close down Ssms altogether, and we get back to Chrome. Now, here's the thing. As I mentioned earlier, SQL Server, by default, is going to want to suck up all of the memory on your computer. And it's set up by default to start every time you boot your machine up. So you typically don't want that when you're just using your own laptop, let's say, or even if you're using your work laptop, because if you're not actually querying the database all the time, why do you want it using all your memory? Okay, so here's how we change that. So down here, type in services. Okay, SQL Server is a Windows service, which means it's something that runs in the background constantly. So click on this, and what you'll see here is it pulls up all the local services. These are all the background services that run on your machine. And good Lord, look at them all, right? Just so many. Ignore all of them. We don't even want to get into that. Okay, so scroll down, and what you want to scroll down to is SQL Server, okay? SQL Server. Now, this right here, this one that's highlighted, it'll tell you, provide storage, processing, and controlled access of data. This is the core service. This is the database engine. This is the thing that makes it go, okay? SSMS talks to SQL Server. That's this particular background service. That's what runs the database. So what we want to do here is we want to go to the properties, right-click on it, go to properties, and you notice that the startup type is set to automatic. That's not what we want. We want to put it to manual. We want to say, look, when I boot up my machine, do not automatically start up SQL Server. I will start it up when I want to start it up. So if you click apply, that'll change the setting from automatic to manual. And you can see right here, it's now manual instead of automatic. That's the only thing you need to do for right now. The other things you can just leave on automatic. It's fine. It's not that big of a deal. Okay. Now, when you're done with SQL Server, let's say that you've shut down SSMS and you're ready to call it a day. You've done the tutorial and you're ready to give the memory back to your machine. Once again, what you do is you type in services down here, click on this, fire it up, scroll down to where it says SQL Server. There it is. And all you have to do is right-click on it and just click Stop. And what that'll do is that'll shut it down. And it'll do this in a nice, safe way. So you just click Stop, and it takes a second here, and you'll notice that it is no longer running. Now you're good to go. Now, let's say you fire up your computer, and you're like, oh, I just saw Dave's post on LinkedIn that the latest blog post in the tutorial's up. Sweet, let's go do some SQL. Cool, what do? You type in services, scroll down to SQL Server, right-click on it, click Start. It'll take a second. You can also do this from SSMS, but I find this is a much more simple process for people that are new to all of this. And now you can say, hey, SQL Server's running. Awesome. Fire up SQL Server Management Studio. You click Connect. Open up your databases. Oh, yeah, and here we are. And then you want to start doing some queries. All you do is you click New Query. What I typically do is I like to just open up the tables because oftentimes I'm thinking about what I'm trying to do. So it's good to have just a list of tables handy while I'm doing that so I can see them, and click New Query. And then you're off and running. Okay, that's it for the install. Hopefully you're super excited about learning SQL. Using your Excel skills, you can totally do it. There you have it. Everything you need to get SQL, a database, and SSMS installed on your local Windows machine. Once again, if you're intrigued by anything you saw in this video, please click up here. It'll take you to my website where you can see this blog series in its entirety. I hope it's goodness for a broad range of people interested in up-leveling their analytics skills. Until next time, stay healthy, and I wish you very happy data sleuthing.